Ever wondered how Native Americans could build a complete home in under an hour? Their remarkable tipi building system held a secret that made the impossible possible. This clever approach wasn't just about creating shelter, it supported their whole lifestyle as they moved with the seasons across the plains. Life on the Great Plains demanded constant movement. For Native American tribes, staying in one place wasn't an option. The buffalo herds they depended on were always moving, and where the buffalo went, the people followed. This nomadic lifestyle created a unique housing challenge. Plains tribes needed homes that could be packed up, moved, and reassembled quickly, sometimes with just a few hours' notice when buffalo were spotted or weather threatened. The teepee emerged as the perfect solution. These conical dwellings were marvels of practicality, refined over countless generations. When broken down, a teepee's components could be transported using just a few horses or dogs pulling travois. The average teepee weighed about 300 to 400 pounds total. Speed of assembly proved equally crucial. Plains tribes could erect a complete teepee in under an hour, quick enough to set up an entire village before nightfall. The teepee's adaptability to different weather conditions made it invaluable. In winter, the covering could be pulled tight for warmth. During summer, the bottom edges could be rolled up for ventilation. The smoke flaps at the top could be adjusted to manage airflow and keep out rain or snow. Nature's thermostat, centuries before modern climate control. But how exactly did they achieve this marvel of a portable house? It all began with something deceptively simple yet ingeniously effective. The secret to this remarkable efficiency started with the tripod frame. 3 sturdy poles, typically made from the lodgepole pine or similar wood, would be carefully selected for their straightness and strength. These poles formed the backbone of the entire dwelling, creating a foundation that could withstand harsh prairie conditions without filing a single permit. To begin, the 3 poles would be laid on the ground, positioned to overlap near their thinner ends. The builder would then bind them together with sinew or rawhide, creating a secure junction at the top. Once tied, 2 people, or sometimes just one skilled individual, would lift this bound section and spread the pole's bases in a triangular pattern. With a soft thud, the tripod would settle into position, standing tall against the prairie sky. No power tools required, just good old-fashioned muscle and know-how. What made this approach so brilliant was its inherent stability. The tripod design naturally resists movement in all directions. A 3-legged structure always finds its balance, which proved essential when facing the unpredictable weather of the Great Plains. Mother Nature could huff and puff, but this tripod wasn't going anywhere. The positioning of these initial poles followed practical wisdom. Tribes would typically align the door opening to face east, allowing the morning sun to warm the teepee while shielding it from prevailing westerly winds. This thoughtful orientation provided natural temperature regulation long before someone could complain about touching the thermostat. With the tripod firmly anchored, the structure stood ready for expansion. But a tripod alone doesn't make a home. The tipi builders moved to the next crucial phase of construction, creating the full frame that would define the dwelling's iconic conical shape. Once the tripod stood solid, Native American builders would carefully select the remaining poles needed to complete the frame. Each pole was intentionally harvested, typically from lodgepole pine trees that grew tall and straight. The builders would strip the bark and smooth each pole, ensuring the valuable bison hide covering wouldn't snag or tear when draped over them. The number of poles varied by tribe and teepee size, but most dwellings required between 12 and 18 additional poles beyond the initial tripod. Larger family teepees might use up to 20 or even 25 poles total. A medium-sized teepee that could comfortably house a family of 4 typically stood about 14 feet tall and 15 feet in diameter at the base. Cozy enough for family game night, but with better air circulation than your average living room. The placement of each pole followed a specific pattern. After establishing the initial tripod, the builder would take the 4th pole and place it against the tripod in a carefully chosen position. This pole would rest in the fork created by 2 of the tripod poles, adding stability while beginning to create the circular base. Each subsequent pole would be added in a similar fashion, working around the structure in a clockwise or counterclockwise direction, depending on tribal tradition. And not once did anyone need to call a helpline or flip through an instruction booklet. The truly ingenious aspect of this construction method was how the poles locked together. As each new pole was added, The weight of the pole itself created natural tension against the others. No nails, no glue, no complex joinery, just gravity and physics working together in perfect harmony. The conical shape naturally distributed the weight downward and outward, making the structure stronger with each addition. Native builders knew exactly where to position each pole for maximum stability. A few months ago, I had no idea what a health ring even was until my fiancée got me one, and I have to say, I'm shocked this isn't a widely known and used product. It tracks my stress levels, and what I found out is that some supplements made my stress score spike, while others actually helped bring it down. I adjusted a few things based on that, and honestly, I feel 10 years younger. My wife mainly uses it to track her menstrual cycles, and she is obsessed with her sleep quality score. I noticed they are currently running a limited 69% discount, but I don't know how long it will last. It's currently only $60, and it's clear. This one is the best bang for your buck, with other health rings priced around $350 with less functions. They managed to price it this low because they cut out the middleman like Amazon, Walmart, etc., who drive up the price and take a big margin, ending up with the customer paying 3 to 5 times more. If you are on TV, you can check it out yourself by pausing the video and scanning the QR code with your phone camera or clicking the first link in the description of this video. The spacing between poles at the base was remarkably consistent, creating a near-perfect circle. This wasn't mere coincidence. Generations of experience had taught them the optimal arrangement. Too close together and the cover wouldn't fit properly, too far apart, and the structure might become unstable in high winds. The poles extended well above the point where they crossed, creating a distinctive crown at the top of the teepee. This extension served a crucial purpose, forming a natural framework for the smoke hole, an essential feature that would allow fire smoke to escape while still keeping the elements out. The extensions also provided anchor points for the exterior adjustable flaps that would later help regulate airflow. During severe weather, the tipi's structural design really proved its worth. The conical shape naturally shed wind, allowing gusts to flow around rather than against the structure. When properly constructed and anchored, a tipi could withstand prairie windstorms that would have the rest of us huddled in the basement checking weather alerts on our phones. The entire pole raising process took remarkably little time, usually less than 30 minutes for experienced builders. The poles were typically prepared ahead of time, with each one sized and smoothed long before the actual construction began. This preparation was part of the teepee's portability system. When a tribe needed to move, they could quickly disassemble their dwelling, with the poles often serving double duty as travois poles to carry belongings. Talk about functional design. These poles didn't just sit around looking pretty. What's particularly fascinating is how this construction method addressed multiple challenges simultaneously. The conical shape provided excellent interior space efficiency, maximizing usable floor area while minimizing materials needed. The sloping walls naturally shed rain and snow. The circular base eliminated corners where cold air could concentrate. The entire structure could be adjusted seasonally, pulled tighter for winter storms or loosened for summer ventilation. Some tribes even developed specialized poles for their teepees. The Blackfoot, for example, often used particularly long poles that extended further above the smoke hole, creating a distinctive silhouette that identified their encampments from a distance. These weren't just functional differences, but cultural signatures built into the very structure of their homes. Archaeological evidence suggests this pole frame design remained largely unchanged for at least 500 years across various plains tribes. It's a testament to how perfectly the solution matched the challenges of nomadic life on the Great Plains. No architectural schools taught this design. It evolved through generations of practical experience, passed down through demonstration rather than textbooks. With all the poles in place, the frame now stood complete, a wooden constellation against the prairie sky. But a framework alone doesn't make a home. It needs protection, warmth, and a barrier against the elements. Now came the step that truly brought the teepee to life. The builders shifted their focus to the one element that turned a simple structure into a real home: the covering. This wasn't just any material slapped over some sticks. The covering represented months of careful preparation and generations of accumulated knowledge about working with one of the plains' most valuable resources, bison hides. The process of creating a teepee covering began long before construction day. Women, who typically held responsibility for tipi making in most Plains tribes, would carefully select and prepare between 8 to 20 bison hides, depending on the size of the teepee. Only winter hides were considered suitable for this purpose. During colder months, bison grew thicker, denser fur that provide better insulation and weather resistance. Summer hides were too thin and wouldn't stand up to the demands placed on a dwelling's exterior, kind of like showing up to a snowstorm wearing a windbreaker. Once the hunt was complete and secured, the real work began. First, the hides were scraped clean of all flesh and fat using specialized bone or stone tools. This tedious process could take days per hide, requiring patience and considerable arm strength. The scraped hides were then stretched on frames to dry, a crucial step that prevented shrinking and warping later. No one wanted to wake up to find their home had suddenly become 2 sizes too small overnight. After drying, the women would smoke the hides over slow-burning fires. This smoking process did more than just add a pleasant aroma. It waterproofed the hides and helped prevent them from stiffening when they got wet. A well-smoked hide could be folded and stored for extended periods without cracking, even through changing humidity conditions. The smoking also gave the hides their characteristic golden brown color that distinguished teepees across the plains. The next step involved one of the most impressive feats of pre-industrial crafting: sewing the individual hides together to create a single, massive covering. Using sinew thread made from animal tendons and bone needles, women would join the hides with incredibly tight, waterproof seams. The thread itself might stretch when wet, but would contract again when dry, actually pulling the seams tighter. This natural property of sinew created self-sealing joints that improved with age. A medium-sized teepee cover required approximately 10 to 12 buffalo hides and contained over 700 feet of hand-sewn seams. Just imagine sewing a king-sized quilt by hand, but with much heavier material, bone needles, and no electric lights. And they did this while also managing households, children, and numerous other duties. The finished cover wasn't a simple circle, but rather a semicircular piece with specific flaps, reinforcements, and pockets designed to fit perfectly around the pole framework. The smoke flaps at the top were carefully engineered to catch the wind and help draw smoke upward out of the teepee. Even the tiniest details were considered, like extra reinforcement strips at points where the most stress would occur. These women were structural engineers before engineering was even a profession. When it came time to install the cover on the frame, precision mattered. The cover would be positioned on the ground at the western side of the frame, attached to what was called the lift pole, and then raised up and around the framework. This methodical approach ensured that the covering went on correctly the first time, because wrestling with a several hundred-pound buffalo hide covering wasn't something anyone wanted to do twice. Once raised, the front edges of the cover were secured with wooden pins where they overlapped, creating the distinctive doorway of the teepee. The bottom edges were then staked to the ground using wooden pegs driven through specially reinforced holes in the hide. In particularly windy regions, rocks might be placed around the base for additional stability. The natural properties of the bison hide made it an ideal covering material. When wet, the hide would actually shrink slightly, pulling tighter against the frame and becoming even more waterproof. During hot, dry weather, the covering would relax slightly, allowing more air circulation. It was a naturally responsive material that adjusted to conditions without human intervention. These coverings were incredibly durable. A well-maintained teepee cover could last up to 10 years with proper care and repair. Given the labor involved in creating one, this longevity was essential. Families would carefully patch and maintain their covers, replacing individual hides as needed rather than starting from scratch. Some covers would be passed down and modified over generation. Different tribes developed distinctive decorative patterns for their teepee covers. The Blackfoot were known for elaborate geometric designs at the base, while Lakota teepees often featured paintwork depicting important events or spiritual symbols. These weren't merely decorative. They told stories, marked accomplishments, and identified the family living within. With the cover secured, the teepee now stood as a complete dwelling, snug, weatherproof, and remarkably comfortable. But a true home needs more than just walls and a roof. Now let me ask you a question. Have you ever had a tent collapse on you in the middle of the night? I have, and let me tell you, it's not a pleasant way to wake up. For Plains tribes, a secure teepee wasn't just about comfort, it was about survival. The difference between a properly secured teepee and a poorly anchored one could mean life or death during a prairie blizzard or thunderstorm. After raising the bison hide covering over the pole frame, the next critical phase began, securing everything firmly in place. This wasn't simply a matter of hammering in a few stakes. The securing process involved multiple techniques working together to create a dwelling that could withstand extreme conditions. The first priority was fastening the front opening. Where the two sides of the semicircular cover met at the front, wooden pins were inserted through reinforced holes in the hide. These weren't just any pins. They were carefully carved to prevent slipping, with wider heads that wouldn't pull through the hide. A typical tipi required 8 to 12 of these pins just for the front seam. The spacing between pins was crucial. Too far apart and drafts would enter. Too close together and the hide might tear under stress. Once the front seam was secured, attention shifted to anchoring the bottom edges. This is where those iconic stones you might have seen in historical photographs come into play. Many tribes used rocks to weigh down the teepee's edges. Not just any random stones, but specifically selected ones that were heavy enough to hold firm, yet not so jagged they damaged the valuable hide covering. In more permanent camps, these rocks might be arranged in a perfect circle, creating what archaeologists today call teepee rings, circular patterns of stones that have remained in place for centuries across the plains. In areas where suitable stones weren't available, wooden stakes driven through specialized loops in the hide served the same purpose. These stakes, typically 8 to 12 inches long, would be pounded at an outward angle to create better resistance against wind pulling upward on the covering. An average teepee might use 20 to 30 stakes around its circumference. When setting up on frozen ground, heating the stakes in the fire first made them easier to drive into the hard earth, a clever trick that saved both time and frustration. The bottom of the covering wasn't pulled drum tight against the ground. Instead, a small gap was often left for ventilation, which could be adjusted depending on weather conditions. During winter, this gap might be stuffed with grass for insulation. In summer, it could be left open for cooling air circulation. For added stability in particularly windy regions, many tribes used what we might call storm cords, external ropes that connected from the upper poles to stakes driven far from the tipi's base. These created additional anchoring points that prevented the whole structure from shifting or leaning in strong gusts. The ropes themselves were often made from braided bison hair or plant fibers treated with fat to increase their weather resistance. When properly installed, these storm cords could help a tipi withstand winds of 50 to 60 miles per hour, speeds that would flatten most modern camping tents. The door covering required special attention too. Unlike our modern homes with hinged doors, teepee entrances were typically covered with a separate piece of hide or woven mat that could be fastened shut from inside or outside. This doorway was usually secured with wooden pins or ties, and in cold weather might be doubled up for extra insulation. The door generally faced east, allowing morning sunlight to warm the interior while providing protection from the prevailing westerly winds. One clever security feature, the bottom edge of the teepee could be quickly staked down from the inside in case of sudden storms. If you were inside when bad weather hit, you didn't need to go outside to secure your home. You could simply reach under the edge and drive stakes through interior loops. Anyone who's ever run outside in the rain to secure a camping tarp can appreciate this thoughtful design element. With all these fastening elements in place, the teepee stood ready to face whatever the prairie might throw at it. But a secure dwelling still needed one more crucial element. Where there's smoke, there's fire, goes the old saying. In a teepee, where there's fire, there better be a well-designed smoke hole, or you'll quickly find yourself in a rather uncomfortable situation with watery eyes and a newfound appreciation for fresh air. The smoke hole wasn't just an afterthought in teepee design. Located at the very top of the teepee where the poles crossed, the smoke hole served as the teepee's chimney, window, and ventilation system all rolled into one. Without it, the interior would quickly become unbearably smoky from the central fire that provided heat and light. Yet simply leaving a hole in the top would invite rain, snow, and cold air to pour directly into the living space, nature's way of ensuring you never get too comfortable. The solution? Adjustable smoke flaps. These triangular extensions of the teepee cover could be positioned using external poles to create the perfect opening size and shape. During calm, clear weather, the flaps might be opened wide to release smoke and let in sunlight. When rain threatened, they could be partially closed or adjusted to the downwind side, preventing precipitation from entering while still allowing smoke to escape. An early weather app that never needed charging. These flaps didn't just vent smoke, they actively helped draw it upward and out. The flaps created a low-pressure zone above the teepee when wind passed over them. This natural suction pulled smoke up and out rather than letting it linger inside. The smoke hole typically measured about 2 to 3 feet across when fully open, comprising roughly 5% of the teepee's total top area. This might seem small, but it was carefully calculated through generations of trial and error to find the perfect balance between ventilation and heat retention. With the smoke hole properly configured, the teepee was now structurally complete, secure, weatherproof, and properly ventilated. But what made this dwelling truly remarkable wasn't just how it was built. After weeks or months in one location, the call would eventually come. Buffalo spotted to the north, better grazing lands available to the south, or perhaps seasonal weather changes demanding relocation. When it was time to move camp, the teepee's true mobility advantage became clear. If only modern moving companies could learn from these techniques, we might all save on those hourly rates. Disassembling a teepee took remarkably little time, often less than 10 minutes for experienced families. The process essentially reversed the construction steps, but with one key difference. Gravity was now working with you rather than against you. The stakes would be pulled first, freeing the base of the covering. Next, the pins securing the front seam would be removed, allowing the covering to be loosened from the frame. No need for those annoying how to disassemble YouTube videos we all end up searching for. Women typically took charge of the covering, carefully folding it along pre-established creases to prevent damage. A medium-sized tipi cover, despite weighing around 100 pounds, could be neatly folded by 2 people in about 5 minutes. The folded cover would typically end up in a compact package about 3 feet by 4 feet. Sizable but manageable for transport. Meanwhile, others would dismantle the pole framework. Unlike the covering, which required careful handling, the poles could be removed quickly and with less ceremony. The main support poles would be pulled out one by one, with the tripod foundation being the last to come down. Once removed, the poles would be bundled together and lashed to a travois, a simple A-frame drag sled pulled by horses or dogs. Nothing was left to waste. Even the stones used to anchor the teepee's base might be gathered and transported if they were of particularly good size and shape. Any internal furnishings, sleeping mats, backrests, and storage containers were quickly packed onto additional travois or carried by pack animals. The most impressive aspect of the breakdown process was how organized it remained, even under pressure. Each family member knew their role, each item had its designated place, and everyone understood the urgency of efficient packing. When you might need to travel 20 miles before nightfall to reach the next suitable campsite, dawdling over packing wasn't an option. Perhaps most remarkably, once the teepee was completely removed, very little evidence remained that anyone had lived there at all. The fire pit might leave a small charred circle, and the grass would be temporarily flattened, but within weeks, most traces would vanish. As the tribe moved to new hunting grounds, they carried their homes with them, ready to rebuild their village in under an hour at the next location. But these mobile dwellings were more than just practical shelters. They were intricate living spaces with specific interior layouts designed for maximum comfort and efficiency.